Welcome back, students and family members. As we continue our study on living things and how they get their energy, we dive this week into food chains and food webs. First, let's take a look at food chains. One of the first questions I want you to consider is what kinds of things do you need, not just want? There's lots of things that we need, not just what we want. Producers eat producers, right? We eat producers. We also breathe the air that they produce. They give us oxygen. So we don't just necessarily need producers. We want them. They have to be in our lives. We depend on them. We also need decomposers. They break down the dead pieces, the dead things on the ground, and provide nutrients to the soil, which we eventually can plant things back into. So as individuals, we need things in our life, especially producers and decomposers. And being consumers, we need those things to do their job. We rely on them. As all living things and ecosystems do, we rely on one another. Let's fill in some blanks here about habitats. 1. Any environment that meets the needs of living things is called a habitat. 2. A habitat for an insect might be very small, like under a rock, but a migrating bird may have a habitat that's very large because they're moving across a continent. 3. Many habitats overlap. Let's take a look at the desert example here. We have the sidewinder, a tarantula, and the sagebrush. The sagebrush is my producer. It needs sunlight, which the desert can surely provide, and just a little bit of water, which the desert can also provide, in which case the sagebrush will survive in the desert, in this habitat. The tarantula needs insects, spiders, and small lizards. It needs it, not just wants them. Otherwise, it wouldn't survive. And this sidewinder needs mice, rats, lizards, and birds. Every living thing needs other things, whether living or non-living, to ensure that they can survive in habitats. Many different habitats can overlap. Let's talk about it. What do the following living things do in the place that they live? Teachers teach, doctors take care of patients if they're sick or well, mothers care for their children, and police officers protect and serve communities. With that in our mind, we can think about the word niche. In habitats and ecosystems, we use this word niche to describe the roles of living things, the jobs of living things. It tells how living things interact with their environment. And if they don't do their niche, then things don't survive, and habitats fail. When we look a little deeper at the word niche, it specifically talks about how you get your food and find shelter, how you avoid danger, how you reproduce or have babies, and how you care for your young. Let's look at a specific example of this bee. This bee gets food by building hives and pollination, lives in a hive for shelter. It avoids danger by using a stinger when in danger, or lives in groups with other bees, or can fly away using its wings if it senses danger. It reproduces by laying eggs, and it cares for its young by pollinating and bringing honey to the larva. That is the niche of the bee. If the bee doesn't do all of its jobs, then the bees, as a population, would not survive. Moving on to our next lesson. I want to specifically think about food chains. This part I left blank because it's very open-ended. Let's think about things that we eat, things we enjoy to eat, and what the food gives us. What does that food give you energy to do? When you've drawn a picture of that food, I want you to write on these lines here what type of things you're able to do because that food gave you energy. Now let's look at some facts about food chains. 1, the movement of that energy from biotic living things Eating something biotic that is smaller is called food chains. 2. Food chains will always start with a producer, a biotic or living factor that can make its own energy, make its own food, like a plant. And 3. Consumers get their energy from eating those producers. Those consumers may be eaten by other consumers. Let's take a look at an example. In this case, we have a deer and a wolf. We know that the deer is going to get its energy by eating the producers, the grass. We know the wolf is going to get its energy by eating the deer. In this specific example, the deer is what we call the prey, consumers that are hunted by other animals. And the wolf is our predator, the consumer that is doing the hunting. Has to hunt down its food. The deer gets its food from the producers. So I ask you this. Is it possible for an animal to be both predator and prey? There are many examples where the answer is yes. Falcon, for example, would be our predator. Meanwhile, the hawk could be the prey of that falcon, but a predator to rats, mice, and snakes, in which case those rats, mice, and snakes are the prey. So when we look at habitats, you can see many different examples where a predator is prey. But we can also see logical habitats where if individuals don't do their jobs, don't complete their niches, then the habitat fails, as you can see in these examples here. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you learned something today.